This is how I used to teach, okay? If you take a look at this notebook, one of the things you'll find in it are the rosters for my classes. You'll find syllabi. You'll find in here class lectures. You will find all the assignments and the guide sheets for assignments. You will find rubrics associated with what I want students to do, and it was very pre-packaged. I had planned a lot. I spent a great deal of time during the summertime or the semester before putting everything together in my classes. And I walked into the classroom and I had my notebook, I was prepared and I was ready. This was wonderful, but the downside for it is it really wasn't steeped in student interest at all. It didn't give me an opportunity to travel differently or to have a point of departure. If I had a classroom full of students who were interested in something else, then it really didn't matter because this is where we were going. And if you asked me on March the 24th what we were doing, I would tell you this is what we have slated in the classes. And unfortunately, if they wanted to do something different, I had already given them the syllabus, which represents the class contract, and it didn't give me an opportunity to modify or to make changes very much at all. And so this represents a change. This talk represents a change in how I have navigated my teaching. I taught that way pretty much for 10 years and then started thinking, what should I be doing differently? How might I engage or enlist students differently in my classes? How can I move and transform my classes to places where students come in and they sit and they listen and they learn, to be places where students actually create and they commit and they be accountable for the things that we do in that space. And so this is my journey really towards collaborative teaching. If you're here and you're a faculty member or you're listening, this has gone viral and you're listening and you're a faculty member, I hope that this helps you to think about how you can travel differently, give you ideas, inspire you to engage in activities that maybe you wouldn't have done otherwise. If you're a staff member and you're present, I hope you will take charge of even your space that we'll talk about in a little bit, and think about how you can collaborate with the people that you work with in maybe a slightly different way. If you're a local business, maybe an executive, a CEO, you're in executive leadership in the metro area, I hope you will think differently about how you are creating or maybe not creating opportunities in your organization for the employees to actually make contributions. And so I'll share as much as I can in a short amount of time with lots of examples for the work that my students and I have created together. Okay, I'm a Lincoln County girl. I grew up in Chandler, Oklahoma, and I think the best example of the notebook compared to collaborative teaching is really choosing to take the turnpike or choosing to take Route 66, okay? The turnpike is the most efficient way for me to get to Chandler, Oklahoma, okay? It is built for speed. In fact, people get frustrated if you take the turnpike and you don't drive at least the speed limit or perhaps 5 miles over. If you want to do something differently, like get off the turnpike, it's virtually impossible. And a detour on the turnpike actually just keeps you on the turnpike, but in a different lane, right? I mean, this is built much like my notebook. It's prepackaged, it's efficient, it's nicely navigated for speed. On the other hand, collaborative teaching is much like the scenic route, right? It's Route 66. It's, you know what, I think as we travel, I'd like some lunch or some brunch, or maybe I'd like a Brazilian guaraná. Let's stop at Pop's because I want to stay there for a little bit and have something to eat. Or there's that barn. What is that tree farm doing there? There's this red big circle building next to the Route 66 right near, you know, in Arcadia. I think let's go check that out. Maybe we might want to have an event there or something like that. You could stop at, and you can't go too fast, right? Because there's some small towns that, you know, where they will ticket you if you travel too fast. So the point is that it's a very different approach, a different way of traveling if you take the prepackaged notebook approach versus a collaborative teaching approach. And so I have to share that with you up front. So these are the three things that I think are the most critical, or at least for me have been the most critical in what I've been doing. The first is co-created space. Co-created space is really a mindset or a philosophy. It's not really a principle. It's the decision that I understand I am not traveling alone, okay? Classrooms have never really been designed to be places where faculty come in as subject matter experts, they spew knowledge out, and then they expect students to regurgitate everything that they said and then they leave, right? That approach does not acknowledge that there are other people present in the space. Okay, so there are other people present in the car, ideally, right? Do you acknowledge when they need to stop or not? In my classrooms, my students are present. They should be able to influence the trajectory of how we get to the learning objectives of our course. So how does it change if I have a classroom full of students who are athletes? Might we explore the sports context a little bit more? Sure we can. There's marketing in sports, there's public relations in sports, there's communication that happens in sports. We can explore that. We can walk across context because what we study is very relevant across a variety of different contexts. But we can't do that unless we acknowledge that students have very different interests and unless we really emphasize co-created space. So for me, co-created space means a co-created course. Our language and our symbols change from class to class. Sometimes it's about being an entrepreneur. Sometimes it's really about sports, in addition to all of the other things that we cover in our class. It does require me to engage in perspective taking. It requires the students to engage in perspective taking as we seek to understand what it is that we want to accomplish. And it is negotiated, okay? I'm still in charge. I'm still responsible and held accountable for what happens in my classroom. It's still my fault if students don't learn. So, but we have to negotiate. So they'll say, can we do this? And I'll say, yes, if we also do this, you know. And that way we end up at a place that still meets the destination of being at the location that we set out to be at. But this is much bigger than me. Co-creative space means that I acknowledge that the students are present and they have just as much of an opportunity to contribute in the space of the classroom as I do. Okay, the second principle that I think is really critical is listening. If you have co-created space and you're going to have a conversation with people present, then that means everybody's got to be listening. The challenge in my case is I don't have a full semester to listen to students. I have only a couple of class periods before I really do have to deliver a syllabus, and we do need to get moving and get on this trip of our class. So what am I listening to? I'm listening to what they want to know, what kind of environment in the class do they want to have, who do they want to be? If you're a professional 5 years from now, what does that look like for you? And how can this class be something that helps you along on that path? What kind of way do you want your learning to be assessed? So there's a whole host of things that I ask students about, and I really spend time listening in the very first few weeks of class to what they say. All right, so we talked about it. You've heard the destination story, all this. Okay, so how does this really work? So here's how this really does work. First, I have to remind you, students don't know they're not on the turnpike anymore. Okay? They think this class is built for speed. And instead, I'm saying, wait a minute, oh, no, that's not where we're going. Instead, you will have a syllabus. We will arrive at our destination, but no, I'm not going to lecture, and no, I'm not going to tell you where we're going, other than the fact that these are the learning objectives. And so now we need to make a decision about how we're going to get there. And so they're like, what? That doesn't feel comfortable. It's out of the routine. It's slower. And in all of their other classes, faculty are walking into the classroom and they're telling them where they're going, much like I was doing with the notebook with my other classes. So the first thing to kind of keep in mind as you listen is you have to empower them to understand that this is really an acceptable way to go. We can really travel this way down Route 66, and it can actually be quite fun. But it's going to be student-centered, it's going to be designed by us, and no, you don't have a syllabus yet. Now, read the chapter 1 and chapter 2 because that's the foundational information, or read these readings, and we're going to make progress while we build this together, but no, you don't have it yet, and you will, okay? So that's very different. So how do you listen then in a short amount of time? Here's what I do. So when I ask students about what they'd like to know and to have and to do, this is what they've said. They're talking. Sometimes I put them in individual sometimes I put them in groups. Sometimes I have them put on 3x5 note cards their own personal desires, but I like to listen to them as individuals and then as groups. When the groups are talking and reporting back to the rest of the class, I like to watch the nonverbals of the rest of the class, whether they're rolling their eyes at this idea of online quizzes, or do they really want a field trip because no, they're too busy, or they have kids and they can't navigate and they can't make that happen. So I'm trying to listen not just to the people speaking, but also to the other individuals in the classroom so I understand if this is really something that can happen. These are just straight lifted straight directly from my Excel spreadsheets or my Microsoft Word documents, and I've made them bigger so you can see, but this is identical to what students have said they wanted. They want to know about building better relationships, improving listening skills. I mean, it runs the whole gamut. What do they want to do? They want to do role play, group activities. They want to watch some business presentations. They want to go visit a company and interact with employees. They're saying they want open discussion and class participation. They want guest speakers. And I must say that it makes it much easier to have a guest speaker because I can tell the guest speaker exactly what students want to know in the class. I can just say, look, this is what they said they wanted to know. You do this all the time. Just answer their questions and they'll be happy with you. This will be a wonderful conversation. This is an example of students who said they wanted a field trip, right? So remember, they're creating, they're committing, and then they're being accountable. So if they say they want a field trip, then I say, tell me when you can make it. Here are all the hours. And so this is a show of hands in this class for when students will be able to make the field trip. And you can see that the majority of students can come on a Friday morning, and so I'll show you how that pans out in a little bit for one of the classes. But the evening time was off limits for this group of students. You can see that. So in other classes, it might be totally different. Okay, I also listened by asking them to allocate 100% of the course requirements, right? That's what the class consists of, is course requirements that are 100%. So if I give you 100%, what percentages are you allocating towards the things that you say you want to have happen so that we can assess your learning? And then these are the kinds of things I say. Normally I do this in teams. So they divvy up 100% and they allocate it however they decide to allocate it. This class was simple. They had 4 categories and it didn't really matter how many teams I had. They all had just 4 things where all the percentages kind of fell along those lines. But I want you to see that class participation for team 1 is at 35%, attendance is at 10, right? So they're saying they want 45% of their grade to be based on class participation and attendance. That's pretty steep, right? And so I have to remind them, okay, this is what you say you want. Are you sure this is what you want? That means you've got to be here. And they'll say okay, or they'll say no, and then there'll be, so then we have a conversation about that. This is another example, just where I've asked the same questions. And in this case, I actually highlighted for the students what they had done so they could understand the implications, right? And so this is all happening in the first few weeks of class. I listen also by asking them to rank content areas in our course. So I know, would the majority of the class rather spend more time on career preparation or more time on teamwork? I ask these questions. You can do the same thing in your classes by asking students individually to rank chapters in your book or different topics that you have that you have to cover, but you wonder which ones to spend more time on in your classes. Here, students are saying relationships and listening as the number 1 and number 2 contextual areas of study that they wanted to be able to focus on and listen to. So listening basically culminates in me having course direction. I've heard what they want, and then we design our syllabus around it. And then after that, they sign a class contract, and then we move on and we finish out the rest of the semester. So I'm not taking a super long time to listen, but this is how the first couple of weeks of my classes begin, with students designing our course. Okay, the third thing, and one of the most important things, is just giving yourself permission to try this and to fail at designing something. Or maybe we said we wanted this on one day in class, and then when they realized the ramifications of how much attendance really was going to be, then, oh, that's not what I want. So there can't be a penalty associated with trying or voicing an opinion. You have to be able, prior to the class contract being signed, make changes or modifications. And then I, as a faculty member, have to be okay with setting the limits really high. The sky's the limit, but not being too terribly upset if everything we set out to do in a class we don't actually get accomplished. As long as the learning objectives were accomplished, we're in great shape. But there may be a whole host of other things, as you'll see here in just a little bit, that we pursued that were really, really hefty things to try to accomplish in a single course. Okay, so what does permission to fail look like? Examples in my classes. Okay, I taught a digital media and content marketing class where we went through this process, and students were really into creating content, studying content, but they wanted a hands-on experience. They wanted to get their hands wet, they wanted to design stuff, they wanted to get things accomplished. So I said, okay, we'll do this semester-long ebook project, right? And you guys will provide the content. We will write the book through multiple assignments that kind of look like this in the class. The first thing that we did was we divvied up platforms. So we had LinkedIn and we had Google. Google Plus was new at the time. It's not anymore. But so we had all of these platforms, and they first did presentations or they first researched them so that they could do a presentation for Oklahoma Research Day. 100% of the students in the class actually co-authored a presentation at Oklahoma Research Day, which is a major accomplishment in and of itself when that's not the only thing that we did. So these are sample posters. You can't read them, but it gives you the gist of what the posters look like. And then these are students who, this is us presenting. It was hosted at Cameron University on that particular year. And the students actually enjoyed the time. I think we had 2 or 3 students who couldn't attend the event, but they still were able to have their posters completed and presented at that time. This student, Kylie, put on her blog post that I thought was pretty fun. She said, "What did you do today?" "I did something cool," So for the class, it was a fun time to go to Lawton, interact. We ate at Buffalo Wild Wings. They presented. We talked about our research, and we had a social media forum there, and it was a lot of fun. But we weren't finished. We also wanted, this is the class and I together, we also wanted to be able to talk to local professionals about how they were using social media platforms. So these are all the companies that the class identified, and then individuals in the class went out and interviewed different people in each of these different organizations. They wrote a report that then was able to be put into our social media ebook that was named by the class, okay? So these are samples of pages from the ebook, okay? This is me introducing the ebook and talking about transformative learning and how we're doing it and what's happening with our class. This is a sample. You can see how the timeline content from the poster actually made its way eventually into the ebook, and then there's a write-up of Quibbid's use of Facebook and how they use it to interact, build their business, connect with customers, that kind of thing. And then these are images. All these pictures were taken by a student in the class who said, "Yeah, I'll do it," and everybody's dressed up. They decided what we would say in terms of the bios. For some reason, they included their favorite animal. That's what came out, so that's what you'll find that on the ebook pages. Anyway, it was a great deal of fun. It was a lot of work, but it was a very different thing that I would never have attempted. I just wouldn't have unless I had given myself permission to totally fail. Because it was just a beast of a project. But it was great. We had a lot of fun, and the students learned a great deal. They were able to add things to their portfolio, which was very nice as well. Permission to fail also means that my classes have a great level more of interactivity where I'm not the one in charge, and they are. They say, "Oh, well, we need to work on business etiquette," and so we're not comfortable in situations. So we hosted a ribbon-cutting ceremony in our class where we, honored one of the students who opened a dance studio, and they all had to come in professional attire with business cards that they had created, and we talked about do's and don'ts and this kind of thing. That's what they said they wanted. They felt like that's what they needed, so that's what we did. The classes look differently. These are just scenes as students are interacting that I'm shooting for you in anticipation of today. But you'll see the students are facilitating not just a talk, but they're facilitating exercises. So this is Connect 4 being played. These are quizzes. The students have taken the quiz individually, and then they're taking it as a group and interacting about the concepts and the topics to see whether or not they agree or disagree with what people have said. So there are many more facilitated, kind of student-facilitated interactive assignments that are happening in classes, and this is being facilitated by a student here where they designed an activity for students to further investigate compliance gaining, right? Okay, so in class, greater activity and interaction and engagement, and then out of class, we have field trips that really have taken place. My class this semester is one of the first classes to actually pull that off, where we actually went as a class to a Thunder game, and they analyzed the communication interaction that they saw. Students who didn't attend could actually go and to either to an event or witness an event and still be able to complete the assignment. We will also, for that particular class, go to 180 Medical, which is a local company that was founded by a UCO alum, Mr. Todd Brown, and we'll have an opportunity to go there, meet with executives on that Friday slot that they said that they could do, and we'll have an opportunity to let them interact with some of the executives. They've done a wonderful job of growing their organization. They've been recognized throughout the state as a best place to work, and so it provides a unique opportunity, I think, for us to spend time talking to them about how they did that. They've just acquired another company. They're moving into new $1 million space, and so we can have the timing is good for a lot of the conversations that students said they wanted to have. So that'll be a lot of fun. So in my classes, things have changed. The way my classes look have changed, but also beyond the classroom, I have had a really heightened level of interaction with students, where the relationship started in my classes, but it has continued very much outside of the class through undergraduate student research. So since the time I've been here, this is really the numbers associated with my undergraduate student research program as I reflected and counted in preparation for today. So students have won awards, we've published in journals and in conference proceedings, we've made 53 state, national, international conference presentations, and the students have had 11 funded grants, and 6 are under review this semester. And so this is what that looks like. They're going to New Orleans and Minnesota and Chicago and Washington, D.C. and St. Louis, and they're presenting their research, they're developing competencies, they're experts, many experts, right, on what they have researched and what they've done. And this is the current research team that we have. We presented in Chicago a couple of weeks ago, and those are images that you see there. So outside and beyond the classroom, beyond the course, collaborative teaching for me has really extended. And so I've met students in my classes and had an opportunity to continue the relationship, continue the research with many of them, and that's been a really fun thing to do. They've won awards, they have totally expanded their resumes and their vitas, and the learning has gone beyond the original learning objectives of the course into a whole host of other things related to travel and professionalism and critiquing other scholars' works, because they're presenting at conferences that are not undergraduate student conferences, but that are just PhD, faculty, deans across the country type conferences. All right, so that's my journey and a little bit about collaborative teaching. I feel that the notebook approach, while it was efficient and useful and helpful, really didn't do the job that I wanted to do in preparing future business professionals. I would much rather my students be able to negotiate for what they want. I would much rather them be accountable for the decisions that they make, and I would much rather them be able to engage and be interactive and facilitate interaction with other people. I think that helps me produce students from a College of Business that are better poised than my notebook approach that I used previously. So I hope for you this has been an opportunity to learn a little bit about what I do, but also I hope this has challenged you in some ways to think about how you're traveling. What path are you on? Are you on the efficient, non-scenic, no detour route in your classes or in your organizations, or are you willing to take detours? Are you willing to suffer the price of innovation, which is sometimes failure, just so that you can try new things? I hope that as a result of listening to me that you choose to travel differently. Thanks for being here and thanks for listening.